There is no second best.
By becoming rich.
Take all your money, buy Bitcoin.
I say when we
You can
sell.
wake up every morning and say GM.
GM. All right. Today's Wednesday. It is the 10th of July. So, market is starting to make its way higher. Now, we're either going to have a rejection at around the same place as last time, where you move down, you set a consolidation, you push above it, price isn't able to hold, we drift back below, and then you're back down towards the lows. Or, as I think we will do now, you push slightly higher. Reasons for that, several of them. One being that the more the market goes down and down and down and down and down, people get very get very pessimistic and think that it's never going to stop going down. Now, there are some important levels that need to be watched, which for me are here. And as we zoom out, we'll look at them and I'll mark them all off. First, we have the old pivot level from all the way back in Feb 21. That has been an important level for the market, as you can see here. We are just above that at the moment. We've got the daily bands, which price is pushed into, the lower band. We have the upper band, obviously, above at around just above 60, and I think that's where we get it. I think that 60 is the area we're going to go to. We were below the 200-day EMA, and we're now back above it. We were below the 200-day, where's my regular 200-day MA? Guess I need to change it. 200-day moving average, we're right up around that level as well. So we're battling around those areas. Now, it's important to note, none of this is bullish yet, right? Like, as price is trying its best to reclaim some levels, it's going to be choppy. And it can either be the beginning of a bottoming range. All right, so there's basically three ways this could go if I take off all this. So, to me, it's either the beginning of a bottoming range over here, which I would see as something like this. I got rid of this fucking thing. Right, either do this here, where this is the first low, we come down, that's the second one, and then we bottom out there, right, where it's push, push, push and hold. And then after that, by the way, this doesn't have to mean it is the bottom. That can also lead just to a further downtrend. This is how markets move, right? There's no guarantees of anything. So there's that. Or the bottom could be in, right? If the bottom's in, what you're going to see is this. You're not going to see us go back below the pivot. Right, that'll become the lowest point for me. So if the bottom's in, there should be strength through here. Price will probably push to the upper band. It will chop back down towards the pivot. It will chop around here, but it will stay inside of this area. And then we'll reclaim the value area low. If that happens, bottom's in. That's where you start building positions. We're going for new all-time high, right? So if that path occurs, you're actually going to see the choppiest price action. You're going to see price probably for the next 2, 3, 4 weeks grinding its way higher. But there's going to be a lot. It's actually going to still be really good trading conditions for low time frame traders because it's a lot of this. It's a lot of that. You're going to have defined support and resistance. And the most obvious to me seems like that 61 is your resistance just above the bands, and then your 58k pivot, which was the lowest daily close over here. It was the wick here. It was the retest here. So if we ping pong around between 58 and 61, it's actually technically 58,400, 61,400. So it's like a $3K range. That's the bottom, right? So is that going to happen? Still way too early to say. We've got a lot more that needs to happen. But ETF flows have ticked back up into positive now for a few days, which is good. New quarter, right? July, start of Q3. Maybe we're starting to see some inflows coming in for funds and investors who are looking ahead now. Maybe they think that the worst is behind us. They're looking ahead to a good Q3 and Q4. Regardless, it's good to see that after them having disappeared. Decent to see it return. Also, funding rates and basis are fairly low. So the odds of this just being money flowing into, long spot and short the futures is less likely, which means it's more likely that it could be some more bullish flows, right? If the flows are coming in just to play an arbitrage, it's obviously not bullish. It's just they're not directional. If it's people directionally buying that thinks, Bitcoin's going to 100K, that's good. So you want to see. So if the bottom's in, we look at that. If the bottom's not in, it's very simple. It's going to not hold. So it's going to do the same thing up here. It's going to come down, but it's not going to hold at the pivot. And the pivot's going to actually not act as the support that you want to see. That point will probably take out the lows. And then from there, you've got two options. So when you have this, I should draw these with different colors, right? So either bull market is back, or you come down and you see this, and it does very typical reclaim and sort of a under-over retest type of move, and then up you go towards all-time highs. And that would be the target, at least this, if not the all-time high itself, 72. I think, to be honest, just all-time high would be the target for either of these. Now, this one doesn't have to mean, neither of them have to mean, by the way, that it's going beyond that. Price could absolutely reject here and go all the way down. But there's no point even talking about that, because the trade that matters is the next long or short trade in whichever direction it's going, right? And if I'm talking about my next swing trade, where do I think the market's going? I think if we see price reclaim and hold, or we see price sweep the lows and reclaim, I think both of those have a target of all-time high, right? Just keep it simple. It doesn't matter whether I think the bull market is over or not over. I've said this a few times in the last few days, and I want to reiterate again. It doesn't matter if there's a bull market or not, because that's just hanging on to old ideas of what that should mean, right? Bull market, bear market. Probably not that effective going forward, as I don't think 4-year cycles will be. Anyway, and then the other thing that can happen, of course, if we come down here into that same low, are unable to reclaim, is lower. And if we go lower, I mean, the targets are probably back to this big area of last known demand, right back down to where the ETF kind of accumulation began after the launch and sell-off. And so obviously I marked this one in red. So they are roughly the paths I'm looking at. Now, I mentioned a few different paths on, I don't know which chart it is. There's an old chart that I have somewhere of BTC. Here it is. There we go. That was easy to find. I mentioned this a few weeks back, saying that if Bitcoin breaks down, so we talked about it here when it was at 64. The exact reason, if you remember from all the way back then, was because the value area of all this distribution at that time, right, the value area of all this was around that 62 to 63 level. And that's very clearly where the market flipped bearish. And I said that at the time. I said, if we lose 62, 63, you don't want to be long. We lost it, wasn't able to reclaim, broke down to here. So in that previous scenario, I was looking at it just like this, right? Just like it is sort of lined out here. This is sort of like a PS where it's a false bottom. So you think it's a bottom. It's not actually a bottom. It goes down one more time. Then it has a strong rally into the FOMC, which is on 31st of July. And then we actually go lower. So that is based on this old point of control at around 67. Or if you draw the profile across to where we broke the range, point of control would be around 63, 64, right, which gives you an area in the middle. And if I go back to my other chart here, that would be the same as this blue path. Right, this blue path is false bottom, we sweep the lows, then we go up. So there's always a chance that in the middle of this previous distribution, price can reject, right? It can reject at that 67 area, or it could reject at around that 63, 64 area as well. So the same thing applies for any of these paths. They might go all the way all, they might reject before it. That's not really a massive concern. The concern is, where's the best place to trade and get long? And if you can get long around the lows, perfect. So what I'm looking at now is days, many more days of price action and chop as we go towards the CPI number, so the inflation number, which comes tomorrow, and the rest of the week. I don't see any major move happening. I'm holding off on any longs, even like short-term ones, because the next trade I see, as I mentioned last night, I see a trade up to about 60 and just slightly above. It's basically a trade to the upper band, which is currently at about 60.5. So we touched the lower band, we rejected off it, we're bouncing around the pivot. So I'll watch that on low time frames for a trade, and I'll mention that in trade of the day. But as we zoom out and look at the next few days / couple of weeks, here's exactly what I think is going to happen. And in all scenarios, I'm confident that 2 weeks from now, nothing much has happened. Maybe we went down, took the lows and came back inside. Maybe we moved up and we're still chopping around here. And I guess maybe we have broken down, but I would say that's actually fairly low probability this month. I would expect more so that we find the black path or the blue path, and when you go forward to middle of July, end of July, sorry, we're probably somewhere 56, 58, 60. I don't think there's going to be a huge difference from where we're at right now, because I see it as just, even if it's bullish, like even if bottom's in, there's so much consolidation that needs to happen, because Bitcoin has to reclaim key levels, right? And it has to consolidate at them. So in reclaiming a key level, you don't just get above it, that's it, but there's retests, right? You don't just get above this pivot and then shoot to the moon, because if you do, that leaves an inefficiency. You don't just reclaim 60. You touch it, there's sellers at 60, comes back to 58, there's buyers there, goes back up to 60, there's sellers there. Usually it's going to bounce around, because on the first and second touches of any of these levels, which you've got 58.4 pivot, you've got 60k, obviously round number, you've got 62k, which is that value area low, you've got 64k, which is a previous point of control, as well as this key high. There's all these levels in between that we've broken down through them all, right? So when we go back to them the first time, there's going to be sellers. So you'll initially get selling at all of them. Just like you can see already, first time we touch the bands, you get selling. Now, all that matters from there is, where do buyers step back in? And then when it goes back the second time, are there still the same amount of committed sellers? Or do they ease up and we push a little bit higher? And that's how price builds its way through different areas. The big mistake that traders tend to make when they're new, and I did this, and I'm sure you've all done this, when you first start trading, you think if price goes to a certain area, that's it. Like, oh, it's gone above 60, that means 60 is now support. We're above 60. And of course, it goes back below it. And you're wondering, how could that not be? Because price takes a lot of time. It takes more time than you want it to form support and resistance. So patience is required. ETH. So ETH, I mentioned this kind of lower time frame path. And I said I wasn't that confident around ETH itself because it seems to just keep pushing and grabbing and pushing and grabbing. And it's notable that Bitcoin was quite a bit stronger than ETH on that last push. Even though ETH is the one that's supposed to have the ETF coming and is supposed to be, you know, the better one, the stronger one, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know. I would still probably just like to see ETH do the green path. Especially if we get a flush back down today. It depends on BTC. If Bitcoin's going to hold that pivot, then ETH will hold nicely here and push up too. But this isn't a very strong market, right? This isn't a strong market. And that's obvious. Which should be obvious, but I don't know. People, I guess, just want, you know, it's okay that you want the bottom to be in, but this isn't how bottoms form. This isn't how it looks. I would say I'm pretty confident that Bitcoin and ETH, these are like false bottoms that end up getting touched, you know, like the blue path for Bitcoin. So bottom could be in, but it probably runs into sellers first, comes down, takes out those lows, and then actually forms a bottom, if it is gonna. And ETH the same thing. Like it's pushed down into an old support level, so that could well hold. But it's unlikely to hold right here, never come back. Again, unless it starts to reclaim key levels higher, I'd say there's more downside to come, but not in the immediate term, right? This is the big difference where there's no point being bearish here as a low time frame view, because the most recent thing we've done is test and hold the lows after the liquidations. So last big push of liquidations, we rallied up, we retested, it held, we're trading above it. That's going to hold, same as Bitcoin. We had mass liquidations, we rallied up, rejected, big rejection of going lower, so rejected the highs first, big reaction, bouncing off the lows, and we're holding up at higher levels. It's not something that we're going to come right back down and revisit straight away. Generally, unless something shifts, the market is just going to continue to grind higher or grind sideways for a while, so a few days, before any next move. And that's usually as simple as a sentiment thing where people have gotten so bearish that they see this little rally and oh, maybe this is it, and they start to get long again. And then as soon as it drops back, they panic and sell and start to short. But you're shorting into very strong local support. Again, it doesn't mean that the bottom's in. But after all of this, the local support, given that we reclaimed the 56k sweep low, given that we're around the 58k pivot, 58.4, unless you start losing those levels again and going back towards 55s, it's far more likely that sellers are going to get absorbed and will just push higher. And it doesn't have to be bullish. Like, it's not a bullish chart yet. Right? The difference has to be clear. It's not bullish, but it can do this, right? Because people just keep trying to short into it, and then it just keeps grinding and chopping up before it eventually goes over. It's just that it keeps sweeping and sweeping and sweeping because people try to short it and short it and short it. And it is bearish, right, in that scenario. So that's the kind of July price action I'm expecting. Probably quite a bit of chop. Probably a lot of flip-flopping back and forth in terms of positioning and opinions and bias. And even as you can see here with this attempted push higher on Bitcoin, it seems to be rejecting so far. And so it just looks to me like a choppy market. No clear direction. No clear impulse. People will panic if it goes to 57, right? But it will probably hold, at least for now. And that's just the nature of these correcting, choppy sideways markets. Like, the inefficiencies go all the way up to here for BTC. And what you see all the way along is like if you take it like a price action trader, let's say you're trading just the order blocks, you can see them all along the way, right? So as the order blocks on this 4-hour chart get hit, Bitcoin reacts. And the way it frustrates a trader is that you want to take a trade, right? So as a trader, you obviously want to take a trade. And so you're looking at this and you've got your order blocks lined out. And you see price come up into it and it rejects, right? Let me see. We'll wait till we get a candle close. There you are. You get a rejection. Maybe you wait for another one. There you go. You're like, oh, order block, bearish, holding, right? So you short Bitcoin and you put your stop above the order block and you put your target for new lows. And price goes in your favor briefly, doesn't go in your favor all the way. And then inevitably you get stopped out, as we just saw here, right? You get stopped out on that move. And now, so that is one trade that's lost, and then it touches this order block. Oh, it rejected off that order block. So we need to short here, put the stop loss there, or put the stop loss at the order block, whatever. The stop loss goes there, targeting new lows. Not realizing that the structure is shifting now, right? Not realizing that the fact that we rejected that one came back up, it's actually showing now, because when price goes down, and it sets an order block, comes down and retests it, it's supposed to just do that, right? It's supposed to hit the order block, go to new lows. Well, when price doesn't do that, when price comes down, sets an order block, goes lower, touches it, comes back, but then reclaims it, that's like what we're doing now, that's a shift. And it's going to squeeze and squeeze and squeeze, and it might end up rejecting at this one, right? So it might come down, people think it's short, boom, blown out again, coming back, they think it's another order block, short again, and gets all the way up to that one, and then that's where it falls off, right? It actually might make it all the way to the original OB. And that's how inefficiencies fill, right? That's how the market likes to move in general. If you don't think this can happen in a mean reverting market, well, what was this, right? What was this little 4-hour order block all the way up here before the big breakdown? Look what price did, okay? And look how long it took. So after that breakdown, you would draw these order blocks all the way across each of these levels. And you're like, okay, well, I'll trade these when price comes back to it. And I'll trade these when price comes back to it. And you've got your breakdown point, and you've got a breakdown point. Where would be the next best one? Probably this one, right? Just looking at ones here, it broke down to there. And obviously this one, that broke down to here. And so you can see, if you breakdown, price consolidates, chops around, breakdown into this level and a breakdown there. And it initially rejects the order block, but then blasts through it. It pushes through this one, but it rejects below it. You could start shorting there, and then it breaks higher, and then it rejects that one and breaks higher, and it gets all the way to the original one to fill in the entire inefficiency, and that's all it did. It just filled in that gap, and then boom, down we go. So when the market doesn't have a clear directional trend, that's what it's going to tend to do. Now, we do have a directional trend on the 4-hour here, which could be a continuation lower. We could also be reclaiming a low there to go into more of a extended mean reverting move, which might see us go all the way up to that original breakdown point that was untested. Market wants to go and clean up inefficiencies. That's just how markets move. So when you zoom out and use that higher time frame context, and you're like, well, where are the order blocks? And I'm just using a 4-hour. You can use any higher time frame. But there's an order block all the way up there that hasn't been tested. That just shows price moved inefficiently. There was an imbalance, it didn't retest. Price likes to retest. That's just the price rule, right? Then we had a breakdown even here. I could use this whole block because if you looked at a higher time frame, it would be one candle. It didn't get retested. So even above us, and there's probably more if I zoomed in, even above us, there's 2 areas that are untested still, right? And yet people are looking at, where do I short and short and short? They're like, wait a minute. Like, I'm talking about here, you could see price squeeze up and up into this one. And even then, there's still 2 way above. And yet, all the people want to think about is, when's the next big breakdown coming? When are we going to new lows? There might be no new lows for well, could be the bottom's in totally, or it might be no new lows for months, right? Push up into that one, push up into that one, grinds its way higher, makes its way finally to the top bit, and then comes all the way back down, right? Yes, it could do that. Yes, it could be October, November before you go down. Like, and what's the right course of action in the next 3 months if that happens? Well, it's actually to be long. But it's not like it's clean, directional, easy bull market. Let's go, we're back. I think everyone wants to think that that's just a given. It's not a given. It's not a given that you're going to see. And don't get me wrong, I'd fucking love it. I hope we get it. I'm waiting for it. But I think it's end of the year. I think it's 2025 before we get one of these big 4-hour huge uptrend. Just clean price action. Massive trend. Do you understand the catalyst that was needed for that? We don't have that catalyst. There was 2 things here that caused price to do this. Right? For price to do all that, you had to have a confluence of 2, once in a cycle factors. 1, BTC oversold. Massively. 2, huge catalyst. ETFs. Sorry to say, we are not getting one of these moves again for, I don't know, long time. Because you just don't get these conditions. You don't get these conditions twice a cycle. You just don't, right? So the reason I say that is because Bitcoin was massively oversold from going from 70k, 69k down to 16, and then starting to slowly rise its way back up. So at 25, sentiment was terrible. People were saying that ETFs don't even matter. Nothing can make Bitcoin come back. Maybe it can bounce to 45k. And if you think that's not true, then you just weren't here. It's true. Any of you guys that are watching this, if you were here in 2023, you'll know at least half the market thought Bitcoin could never get back to all-time high. Others said, yeah, maybe we get a rally, but it's just going to be an ETF rally. Sell the news. Right? So it was oversold on all technical measures and sentiment and positioning, which meant any kind of catalyst could produce bigger upside. Then we got the biggest catalyst ever, ETFs. Billions and billions and billions, up to 15 billion of inflows now, which was just this part, by the way. And then this part, which was front-running it. So the front-running trade and then the billions actually flowing in gave us that enormous trend. If you think that we're going to copy-paste and have this exact same trend again on Bitcoin, you're probably wrong, right? Probably. Because it's just not that easy to have another significant catalyst that can drive us in the same exact phase of the market, same move. And I'll explain it if I can find a fucking chart. If I can find a chart that actually has price history on it, that I haven't scribbled all over. Here we go. In 2021, we had the major trend as Bitcoin again was oversold and undervalued. Because at this point, we didn't know how much Bitcoin should be worth. But it turns out Bitcoin should have been worth way more because of all the money printing. So we got these really strong trends up into the end of April or mid-April. But then the second time, we did not get strong 4-hour trends. There was not a significant catalyst to drive Bitcoin's price into really strong trending conditions because there wasn't that much more money being printed, right? The vast majority of the money was printed over here. And people realized how much Bitcoin was worth. And then they realized they saw the crash. And so there wasn't a catalyst. It wasn't oversold. I mean, it was here, right? At this point, it was oversold. But at this point, it was overbought. We had a range, right? It went to range low and it went to range high. So yeah, it's cheap here, it's expensive here. But there wasn't a catalyst for Bitcoin to have parabolic, strong, trending price action like this upslope and strong, and then it started to weaken, but this part, up and up and up, and it's accelerating in a curve, it's curving up, pulls back, same again, fucking Tesla buys Bitcoin, all that, then it weakens off and we sell off. This second part was not that. Look at the 4-hour trend. 4-hour trend structure only held from July until September. That's late July to early September. 5 weeks. It held and it was rounded and bouncing and hardly bullish. And then it broke. And then it restarted again for a last little push for about 30 days. Right? Just the month of October. And we held and that was it. Now, great, amazing trades here. Money was made. And by the way, it doesn't mean other stuff can't trend, because at that same time, you had some of the best trends ever on coins like Solana, right? So, in that exact same phase, after the July lows, you had Solana with the strongest 4-hour trend you'll ever fucking see. Boom, away it goes. Massive move up, pulls back, reclaims it once, away we go into the highs. You had Axie Infinity, just doing mad shit over here. Same thing. Great, strong, parabolic trends in the July, August, September phase. Move up, buy the dip, buy the dip, buy the dip. Bands break briefly, away they go again, up into the highs. Now, that's because the catalyst for other things is just simply money rotating. So, Bitcoin might not give you these amazing October to March type moves again in this cycle, because it probably has to either get really oversold so that it becomes good value, or we need another massive catalyst. I don't see a catalyst bigger than the ETFs. The ETFs could put another 15 billion in, it won't move the price the same because people are expecting it. You can only do that once, the start. You can only launch it once. So anyway, that's long enough of a rant. GM. And that's not meant to be negative. That's far from it. That's very positive in terms of what could be coming next. The point is, don't just blindly expect that the next time it reclaims that we're going that's it, we're just going to fucking trend clean to 100k. Probably not. It's probably more likely that, you know, the structure breaks several times and you get these 4-hour trends that start and then fail, right? It comes up and it's kind of like trying to get to the highs and it drops off a bit and then it's up again and it's like trying to get to the highs and it's coming off a bit and then it's up. And if you're just looking at it, the trend is not as clean as this one. It's still making its way there, right? But when there's an absence of a catalyst, other stuff's going to have to step in. GM.